So, guys, tonight we're going to talk about how we just got bounced out of the playoffs. We're going to start it off with a trade, as always. Scott, you are first. There's a 12-team Superflex PPR 1.75 for the tight end start 10. So you were just knocked out of the playoffs as the 3 seed. Scott, are you giving your Joe Mixon? You're getting an early 25 second and a 26 second. Go ahead, man.
All right, well, I'll preface this by you're out. You're probably not getting any more than this for Joe Mixon. So the first question you ask yourself is this enough for me to move off of the rest of Joe Mixon's career, whether that's another 6 games, another season? Hell, it could be another 3 seasons at this point. We don't know. But that's the first question you have to answer is, am I ready to trade him? Because it's going to affect your construction. It's probably going to affect what you have going into next year to an extent. So you have to ask yourself that. If the immediate response is he had too good of a season, I can't trade him for this, I need more, odds that you get more is extremely low for a lot of guys in this range. You're just not going to get more. The demand for this type of player doesn't exist until they're healthy and they're smashing in season, and that probably means they're doing good for you, and you're more likely to not want to trade him when that's happening. My response would be, I'm guessing the team that wants him now for the last 2 weeks maybe had another injury to another running back. Can I get that guy? Montgomery maybe. And a second. That way I still have the hedge of I have Montgomery next year. You know, he's going to give me some RB2 production probably.
Right.
And I get the second. I'd almost rather do a deal like that. Maybe there's another running back that maybe is banged up. Can I get Travis Etienne in a second? Something like that where I go, it didn't affect my construction, but I gave the person what they wanted. And if I need a guy like Mixon or James Conner, like if all I have to give up is a second and an injured player, you have to heavily consider that too, because you're going for a championship. So I would look there before I accept the 2 seconds, but I do think it's a reasonable price because you're probably not getting more.
Shane, would you even mess around, man? That is sitting in your inbox. So you're giving Joe Mixon, you're getting an early 25 second and a 26 second. Are you taking those picks, or are you going to do some countering and saying what else you could do? Maybe more, get a little more creative.
Yeah, maybe I would try Scott's idea, right? But I wouldn't just counter on Sleeper. I'd set up a whole other trade. A whole other trade. I'm not modifying it just because if push comes to shove, yeah, I'm taking it. And, you know, to Scott's point, if you need a running back next year, I'm pretty sure you could buy one with a second. You'll have a 26 second in your pocket. I'm assuming you're not going to use that in the draft this year because, well, it's 2025. So I can almost guarantee that you won't make that pick this year or next year. You probably won't trade it. It's going to be something that you have in your pocket for whenever you need it. You know, that second next year could end up being Cortland Sutton this year, Jerry Jeudy. And then, you know, obviously the 25 pick, fungible, you do whatever you want. So I'm not adverse or opposed to trying to get creative. Yeah, can I get another running back? Can I get a wide receiver? Can I get Rashid Shaheed? You know, someone that's like completely forgotten about. People forgot that he was smashing to start the year. Chris Godwin, who was smashing up until he broke his ankle. I don't even remember. Whatever happened to him, people probably forgot about them. So I'd look at the injured players like Scott said, but I'd probably be looking more at the wide receivers.
So Scott, obviously there's a bunch of different scenarios, lots of variables involved here, but let's take a scenario where you limped into the playoffs. You barely snuck in. Your points for was miserable. Your points against was pathetic, but you made it in. You had to spend your first to do that, but now you're bounced. What are you doing?
Ooh. So I jumped into a toxic relationship knowing that it was going to completely wreck my life, and I did it willingly for the short-term benefits of saying I was in the playoffs. Basically, I'm in a bad spot, right? I've traded my first. You've basically told me I was a fraud team. I should have never traded my first. I should have tried to limp in, doing everything I can to not trade my first, but I don't have it. So I think you have to start by go to the teams that are still in it and what type of quote unquote leverage trades or process trades can I make? Like you have to make the deal where you give the quote unquote better starter to get back the injured player in the second. You have to be the one that probably tries to recoup some assets. You don't have a first. Now you're not going to get a first back. You're not trading starters that you probably had. Now, if you can go, well, what did I spend my first on? Can I resell that to somebody else for a first? I would do that. But I'm assuming that the teams that are in the final four probably have decent starting lineups. They're looking for a certain caliber of player, and they may not have first and players to just throw at you that you want, but they're also trying to use for the home stretch. So Sometimes it's hard to find deals. I've had a couple deals that have already fallen through because the team is they are blowing it up after getting eliminated from the playoffs. So I'm speaking to the teams that just lost. I'm trying to buy. They are blowing it up. They're not interested in my Christian McCaffrey or my David Montgomery. And I'm going, okay, but I'm giving you good credit on them in the deal. They're not interested. The only thing they want are my young receivers that are smashing. I'm like, yeah, but I'm starting those guys. Like the deal just doesn't line up. So I think you have to be the team that is willing to accept probably what other people want to sell, which is going to be the injured players, which is going to be some of the players that they're not using. Like Deontay Johnson is a person sweetener in a deal. He's not good now, but if you can get him as a throw-in and valued as like a late third, I'll take him back. But you don't look at it and go, well, he's not a sub 24-year-old young player that is going to be a smash next year. That's all I want. Because nobody's going to be selling that, because that largely doesn't exist on some of these teams that are trying to buy. So you got to be creative. Look for value, especially if you've depleted your first and you don't have it. Look for a deal where you get 3 options back. You know, you sell the player that everybody wants for the stretch and you get a couple misfits and maybe a second and then maybe a couple players that you might be able to flip at a later time next year. You got to look bigger picture. You're not going to get all the sexy dynasty assets because they're either good and the team is playing them, or they're not doing good and you don't want them because they're not good. Just because they're young, I don't want them because they're not any good. So be creative, be flexible, but take value back. This is the time to value hunt if you're out of it, because other people are going to kind of abandon their value principles when they're buying.
All right, so Shane, here's another scenario for you. You were the 3 seed. You had a bunch of hammers. You were knocked out in a massive upset. The question is, would you swallow your pride and sell your Saquon Barkley to the team that just knocked you out? What would that have to look like if so?
Not only would I trade with them, I'd probably be trying to trade with them during the game. If it's clear that I'm losing, right? And I've got one playoff game where I'm losing literally by 150 points somehow. The dude put up 240 points and still had players to go. Clearly not going to be winning that game. I'll start sending offers then. Like, I don't care. What's pride? Like, pride really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is maximize the value on my roster. Saquon is, notwithstanding last week's game, is still someone that can tip the scales to win someone a title, and I need them to pay for that. So I'll be offering it to them. I'll offer it to the other people in the other brackets, because there's still, 3 other teams left. Everyone's getting an offer. Like, during the game, everyone's getting an offer. But yeah, I'll DM
this
them.
Is true. This is not even Shane just messing around. He's doing this.
Look, and then you know what? You know what's funny about it is that you make these deals with the team that just beat you, and it creates this false camaraderie. Like, all of a sudden your buddies are now.
You have a relationship. Yeah.
I really hope you win it all now. I hope Saquon goes out there and puts up another donut. I hope, you know what I mean? I can hope that inside and be petty, but there's no reason to be petty where it affects and hurts my team and acquiring assets.
All right, so Scott, here's a scenario for you. You were on bye. You were in your happy place. Now it's time to play fantasy football again. Last week, you were thinking about trading a couple assets. You had to buy a player. You decided to wait. Now you're back in that situation again. Your opponent is fired up. What's your move?
Well, hopefully, while my opponents were getting beat, I was sending them offers to try to buy their players as they are fledgling out of the race. And I'm tempting them with an offer that is on the table before they get offers from the other 2 teams that are advancing. So trying to get ahead of the game. But if I've missed that window, I'm now competing with the other 3 teams that are still in the playoffs. And so I'm not going to look at all their rosters and try to figure out what they need and what they don't need. But I am going to probably look around and go, okay, who really is going to need a quarterback, or who really is going to go, oh man, there is an eyesore in their RB2 spot because they lost both of their starters. If there's those scenarios, then I'm thinking, okay, is there any just really low-hanging fruit moves I can make to play defense? Like the replacement running back for Nick Chubb. Can I go get him for something that I don't really care about? You know, this is the season to overpay, but when I say overpay, it's not give up draft capital. It's not give up flexibility. But if I know that my opponent is going to go buy the spot start Jerome Ford to replace Nick Chubb, I'll go give another backup running back that people like just as much as Jerome Ford, and I'll kick in a third just to block them from getting that. And if I'm going to use that player, then fine. But at least I now have a little leverage to where I'm the first to the market. And does that create some scramble by some of the other managers? Maybe. But I think I want to kind of figure out what my opponents are going to do. It's a 2-week season at this point. It's really a 1-week season, because if you have no trade deadline, the beauty is if you win, 2 other teams are getting eliminated after this week, which makes 2 more vulnerable people that go, oh, I now maybe have a couple pieces to sell.
Market's
Maybe not their
bigger.
whole team, but you got to win this week. Like, you do have to kind of look at the matchups. You have to look at what your opponent needs. And again, do not be scared to give up players that you may like, that you're not sure the player you're giving is more valuable from a dynasty standpoint than what you're getting back, but what you're getting for the short term way outweighs that. If you're trading, I'll give an example. A guy that got injured, Xavier Legette, is probably going to miss the rest of the year. What is he really besides a rookie receiver that's probably okay? That's it. He's not an asset I'm losing. Like, if I can get something useful by using him in a deal, that is the type of player I 100% don't have to have any exposure to going into next year, because I should be able to get some at another time if I want. So just don't really think about dynasty value right now when a lot of the people you're trading with are going to be looking at dynasty value. Trying to be thinking what they're going to be looking at and abandon some of those principles, because I've seen deals not get done because people, I really like that guy next year. I can't give him up for the 2-week spot starter. And it's like, really? You wouldn't trade Xavier Legette for the Jerome Ford replacement, and that cost you the championship? Wasn't worth it.